I like sculptor.
Sculptor?
Yeah, craftsman, sculptor.
When you say those guys, who are you thinking of?
Oh, I'm thinking of Bernini.
Uh-huh.
You know, like I'm
I
not.
mean, if you're a sculptor comparing yourself to Bernini,
Yeah,
you're never going to be happy.
Oh, you're never gonna be happy, and you're never gonna be close.
Today we're going to take about a 40-minute ride to the outskirts of Chiang Mai to visit my studio in the jungle.
You said you were 18 when you first came here?
Well, I was 9 months old when I first came here.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but then I came about every, 1 or 2 years since then.
Yeah.
So I first came here in like 1990. I first came here on my own when I was 18. Because my parents were, antique dealers, I would say that my family's specialty was finding things in dusty markets because there's thousands of, and it's almost like an artistic decision, I feel like, because you're going through tens of thousands of objects in some of these places, and you're choosing the ones that you think have some kind of a value and have some kind of power, or have some kind of story behind them.
So I feel like, I was going to say you're an artist, and then I was like, do you identify as an artist?
I like sculptor.
Sculptor?
Yeah, craftsman, sculptor. I think it's more niche. Like if you're going to say artist, it's kind of such a broad thing that like, I think might as well say like a specialty. I don't know. It's kind of the universal title. So I never really felt comfortable with the term artist for some reason.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. It's like you're bestowing some kind of importance to it or something like that. I mean, I'm serious about what I make, and I like to make things well, but I don't know if that, necessarily qualifies you as an artist. It's always felt like something that's the unachievable, especially if you compare it to history. You'll never be on the same level as those guys. So I don't know. Maybe that's just my crazy.
When you say those guys, who are you thinking of?
Oh, I'm thinking of Bernini. Like I'm not.
I mean, if you're a sculptor comparing yourself to Bernini, you're never going to be happy.
Oh, you're never going to be happy, and you're never going to be close, even if you're, even if you're really good, you're not going to be Bernini. So I think, I don't know. Bernini's an artist for sure.
Yeah. Do you think that you make work to express the sublime for yourself or to elicit the sublime in viewers?
See, I don't even know how to talk about that.
Did I get braggadocious?
Yeah, it's the same phenomenon. I mean, I like to make things that people connect with. Obviously, I think like if I can make something, and I pride myself on making something that is accessible and something that normal people could afford. It's not like some kind of inaccessible thing that's far away. If I can make something that's really well crafted and make it at a price that people can actually afford, and then I like the idea of making utilitarian things that people can actually like hold and touch and put their lips on. If you make a cup, it's like a very intimate thing that I feel like is kind of exciting in some ways. It doesn't just sit on some white wall, or it's more often than not like sit in some collector's basement gathering dust. If it can be something that's actually used,
I feel like is something that people aren't crazy familiar with. Just in general, that you're like, oh, like, well, the mug from IKEA is $1.50 and the one from Target is $4.50 and the one at the boutique downtown is $25. But like, and of course that value may or may not reflect the actual quality, like in those circumstances, like they could all be made out of the same thing and just have the contact.
But what you're just saying reminded me of this like alchemical moment it was a kind of light bulb going off in my head when I was trying to decide what I wanted to do in art school. I took a pottery class from Akio Takamori, and I was in the class. He's the nicest guy in the world, funny little Japanese guy, super sweet. And he made a little pot, and he just formed it into a kid's face. And I don't know if you're familiar with Akio's work, but they're just like charming, cute little marshmallow kid kind of things. And then the next week I was at an auction house, and one of them came up to auction, and it sold for $1,000, which was an infinite amount of money when I was 19.
Yeah.
When I first had that class with Akio, and then I got to see the guy that bought it, how happy he was. And it was just like, wow, okay, this guy, Akio made it. He loved making it. And then it went to this auction house and it sold for this exorbitant amount of money. And then this guy bought it and he was just beaming ear to ear.
Oh.
And I was like, wow, that's crazy. So you have this like interaction where you literally took like 20 cents worth of material and turned it into something like really valuable. And I thought like, wow, that's really cool, because bronze and marble and that kind of stuff has some kind of intrinsic value. And so with clay, it's basically worthless. So it's all just on how you manipulate it. And that to me was like, that was really exciting. I saw that, and I that was a moment where it's kind of like, wow, this material is capable of alchemy.
That's really beautiful. And that, like, just like, yeah, through the power of like vision and hand and time and fire.
I had a motorcycle, and it was the first time I was coming down here. I heard that there was a couple different ceramic studios down here, and I was really interested in kind of checking it out and seeing what they were doing. I'd also had no luck with, I tried 3 different ceramic studios to go visit, and we tried projects and they just didn't work out, or didn't happen, or just didn't click. And so I came down here on my little Honda, a little vintage Honda, and I started crossing the road, and some girl came up from behind me on the opposite side of the road and just T-boned me right when I was coming right into the with another motorcycle, right when I was pulling into this guy's house. I kind of overshot it. I didn't know where I was at the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, it crashed, and then he was the first one on the scene, like before anybody. And I don't even know how he got there so fast. It was like he just appeared, and I stared up at him, and then I noticed that he had this amazing turquoise necklace with Tibetan. It's the very green Tibetan turquoise. And it's this kind of, my mom was into beads, so I knew a little bit about beads. And there's something where beads can marry, where if you wear a necklace for like 100 years, the stones start wearing, and then so I was sitting there bleeding, and I'm bleeding like out of everywhere in my body. And then at the same time, look up and like see this guy, and I noticed his necklace, and then it was the guy that I was looking for, which was very odd. It was just like a surreal moment. And then that whole moment led to where I am now, I guess.
Yeah, this is where the magic happens.
Oh, it's beautiful here.
So yeah, we've been working together for about 8 years. This is where everything is made.
So did it start out in this space, or was this something you grew into?
It was way smaller. In the beginning, it was just like that initial front left side. And then as time went on, we kind of like added another little block and another little block. So yeah, and then eventually it became what it is now. Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with the ceramic process. This is how my skulls are made. It is basically like you're pouring a clay slurry into a ceramic mold. So you can see we have them like all lined up here. Pouring the clay inside of here, and then it's sticking to the edges. So it goes in, you have this banded up tight. You wait for like 30 minutes, and then the plaster absorbs some of the outside, and it's left with a shell, and then takes hours and hours to refit them so that they are redetailed afterwards.
Just like the inside is hollow at that point because it sticks to the outside, or do you have to carve out the inside to create the actual cup shape?
It dries on the outside, so it basically creates like a ceramic shell. You can feel like plaster feels super dry.
Right.
And so it wicks up the moisture that's touching the plaster. And so all the areas that are touching the plaster become harder and drier faster, and then you're left with a clay shell. But that clay shell is very malleable when it first comes out, so you have to kind of be careful because it can deform.
Right, I bet.
And so it goes from that stage which we're casting over here. And then it goes on to the detailing stage. So we usually let it dry up in a cooler. These are some oyster shell shot glasses that we're working on.
Cute.
For a bar in Seattle.
Uh-huh.
But these you can feel are like very soft if you touch the top part.
Yeah.
These are probably just out of the mold, so they're very malleable. One of the hard things about plaster molds is they do wear out. So it's not like a silicone mold or like a mold that you do use with bronze. They slowly wear out over time, and you lose detail, and then it becomes more of a task to put the detail back in them again. Because every piece has little mold lines and things, like when the molds come together, there's seams, and so you're hiding it and trying to put detail back into it again. So then you can see, like, in the next step, it's a little bit more dry. And these have been cut. The spout on them have been, like, cut off.
Yeah.
And then, oops, sorry. If you feel like the top there, it's like, this is what they call like leather hard.
Yeah.
So this is the next step before they go and are fired the first time.
Well, like, the seam is already gone.
And then the last, so that would be ready for the first firing. Probably put a little bit more detail in there. And then it goes in the kiln the first time. And it comes out as a kind of bisqueware. So you can see this is after it's been fired once. It's one of the bowls, and then it's hard. So this time it's fired to like 700 degrees. And when it's fired that high, then it's ready for glazing.
It's amazing how much it like already feels.
It's clay-like, but at this stage, you could break it like with your hand. It's still very fragile. My kids, my non-tam, demi. Me fun, fun non. No. This one, you could still save it. Like here, I've done it too light, and I think it's because my sponge is dry. But you can just wipe a little bit with the brush and then fade it back in again. So you're kind of building up layers. It's a lot like it's a kind of patina, and it soaks in, but you have to get it balanced because it has to look natural.
Yeah.
And sometimes, a patinaed object over time, like it kind of balances out. So that's I want it to look like a well-worn skull,
Well, it seems like with all of this handwork, like each one's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, and that's what we take pride in, is every piece is a little bit different. Put a different missing tooth, put like some kind of different suture lines on the skull, or different tentacles on the octopus, different shades. So my thing is they all have to look nice at the end, but it doesn't matter if they look the same or not.
Right.
And it keeps it interesting that each piece is a little bit different. It's kind of unique. It's not, because there's so much handwork that goes into it, it's like they become whatever your mood is that day. So sometimes it's like, okay, I'm going to go really hard on it and make the lines deeper, or it's going to be darker or something. It can change like just based on how many cups of coffee you had. And a mold is not something, it has a kind of bad connotation, but basically every piece of like every bronze, Cellini or something like that is from a mold.
Yeah.
And the process for bronze is very similar, especially the ancient process for bronze before they had silicone was very similar to the ceramic process. So you get it gets you like 70% of the way there.
Yeah.
But then that final 30% is like what makes and breaks it. And you have to be present, and you have to really care about each piece. Otherwise there's evidence of that. So I think that's why there's not a lot of like detailed ceramics.
It must be so much more rewarding than if it just was
the same thing
over and over. Yeah.
Because, and I think that's what makes it different from like art and production, is each piece does have some kind of influence of the feeling that you had that day. This is Dan.
Shop dog.
Yeah.
Hi, baby.
He will put ceramic dust all over your shirt. Here, this is probably 6 feet deep of all of my broken dreams.
Oh my gosh.
So these are all little imperfections, like maybe it was fired too hot, or their detail wasn't quite right, or there was some kind of pinhole be careful when you pick it up because there might be some kind of weird animals living inside.
Yeah.
This one's got a spider in the eye. It's pretty graveyard-like. Yeah. So you can...
Every time. It just feels wrong. Oh, man.
Like what I was talking about before with the skulls, that there's this kind of rust and weathered wood and foliage here that I think the skulls really come from, or the patina glaze that we use. It really works with this kind of environment where if you're in, I don't know, Germany, Japan, like the atmosphere would be different. And if you were trying to make the things we're making here, I think it'd be difficult. And if you try to make the things that they make there, it would also be difficult. And the spirit house.
The spirit house? So people burn incense here, the team will?
Yeah, they take kiln gods even more seriously. I think, I don't know if printmaking has gods, but
oh yeah,
the kiln god is definitely a thing in ceramics.
Do you feel that it grew really organically, or did you have a vision, anything like this, when you were taking a motorbike out here all those years ago?
Definitely wasn't like this, you know. I kind of thought, okay, I know it's possible to make things here. I know the materials are all the same. That's the one thing that's kind of nice about ceramic is there's no like cheat codes going to Asia. It's still molds and clay, and you have to mix it. And if anything, it's harder because they don't have a pottery shop that does it all for you. Like, there's no glazes that are pre-mixed. You have to kind of figure it out on your own. And a lot of the clays are like that too. So I didn't really know what I was getting into, but it was just like, okay, I'll try this. Kickstarter, the first one, like made it so it's like, okay, I don't have any money. I don't have any way to sell anything. I'll try this just as like a Hail Mary kind of, okay, will this work or not? And then it got a little bit of attention on the first one, and then it kind of got me started working in the right direction.
And so in terms of like creating like a new piece, tell me sort of like that kind of top to bottom. So you get either you decide, all right, it's time to put a new thing out in the world, or maybe you get a commission. What's that whole process, the life cycle from your brain to the second firing here in the studio?
I get obsessed for a while, and I'll dive in and I'll start doing strange things. I'll look at every other piece that's been made, where it is in history, if there's any philosophy behind it. I'll read books about that subject. So if there's, making a devil piece, it's like, okay, I got to read Faust, and I have to watch some Faust movies, and I have to like really study this character and then like develop from there. And that fun, I always think like when it's in the mind's eye, it's very fun because it's conceptual and it's kind of fluid. And then once you bring it to an actual piece, then you have to like work with the confines of reality and like what bringing that thing into the world actually is. Then you make it, and then once you get it 90% of the way there, I always think that that's the hardest part. And then that like last 10%, that's the most difficult thing. It's like making it to the quality that you want. And that's always the most difficult part, because the last 10% takes way more time and energy than the first 90%.
Yeah, that makes sense. I remember thinking about sometimes that in school, where I would be like, this paper's an A-. And it would take me just as much time to make it an A. So I think I'll just take the A-. What does that kind of excellence look like? How do you know when a piece is there?
I don't know if I'd use the word excellence. You know, I feel like you strive for excellence, but it's never quite there. And I think that's what makes you keep going. So it's like, I don't think I've ever been totally content with something. And then once you are not content, then it makes me want to like try again. And like, okay, I'll try to go again and again and again. And it's never quite there, but you get maybe a little closer every time. 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing.
Yeah. So like all those different voices and life stories are now into each piece that comes out of the studio.
Yeah, and to me that's like really important. You can't fake it. So it comes from this kind of place. It's right on the edge of the jungle. There's all these patinaed woods. There's all of these like old things here, and they fit right in. And it's not trying to like not trying to be Japanese ceramic. It's something that could only be made here. And I really try to like lean into that. Trying to make something that like really like comes from this place, and you can feel it once you're there. And then once it, hopefully once it's sent to wherever its final destination is, like they have some kind of feeling of this warm and interesting place that it's made in.
Yeah, I think one of the things about Thailand, and I think particularly Chiang Mai, is that it really feels like the jungle is just on the edge of taking back civilization all the time. Like we were really just keeping the jungle at bay by just a hair's breadth here.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, that bee that just almost stung you, or the vines that are just slowly creeping up the kilns. I think if the kilns didn't heat up every day, they'd probably just start eating the kilns. It's been a really fun place to work, and it's definitely has its perks compared to Seattle life.
I'm sure. Yeah.